Tonight, the snow drifts down gently and slowly onto the ancient cobblestones of a forgotten London street. Every flake sparkles beneath the warm light of gas lamps, swirling softly through the mist like quiet memories of Christmases gone by. You can almost make out the soft ringing of carriage bells, the sound of a choir disappearing down a foggy lane, and the happy laughter of families gathered behind icy window panes. But this isn't the Christmas you might imagine. No. Tonight we journey back to the year 1890, a time when Christmas was filled with both magic and old fears, when happiness was always touched by something mysterious. Welcome, dear listener, to Victorian Christmas, the lost customs and eerie tales of 1890. Before we start, I'd like to ask you, wherever you might be, to come along on this trip through time. Perhaps you're listening from the US, wrapped up under a blanket. Or maybe you're in Europe, where the winter darkness has already arrived. Perhaps you're in Australia, where the warmth buzzes outside and Christmas feels like summer. Tell me in the comments, where are you watching from tonight? What time is it there as we move into this story together? If you haven't done so already, get comfortable. Turn down the lights, make a warm drink, maybe a little hot chocolate or tea. Let the day slip away as the past starts to come alive again. Tonight, we'll walk through candlelit rooms, listen to old songs, and discover the scary stories once shared by the firelight of another time. Now, are you ready? Then get settled and let us start. The winter of 1890 came like a quiet king, dressed in white and topped with frost. By evening, the city of London had become a place of quiet beauty. Its streets covered in snow so thick that even the sound of carriage horses seemed quiet, turned into the beat of a distant dream. The Thames, dark and slow, breathed out misty fog along its edges, while the bridges above shone with thin lines of ice. Each lamp glowed in a soft golden haze. The air itself seemed to hold a kind of silence, the sound of a city waiting quietly. You could only hear the far-off noise of a fine cab moving down Fleet Street, or the quiet call of a newspaper boy shouting headlines into the cold. Every word disappeared almost right away into the fog, taken in completely by the snow-filled night. Shop owners stood in their doorways, wiping powdery snow from their coats, while from the upper windows of the houses came the light of candles. Small, steady lights against the dark. Behind those panes, living rooms glowed with warmth, brass pots steaming, pine branches filling the air with scent, oranges stuck with cloves arranged carefully along fireplace mantels. In one window, a violinist played carols for the evening, his music moving through the cold air like threads of silk. The smell of roasted chestnuts floated from the corners, mixing with the sharp smell of coal smoke. A lamp lighter walked by with his pole held high, lighting one by one the lamps that would watch over the city through the long night. Each flame caught the falling snow, making it sparkle. But if you listened carefully, really listened, beneath the laughter of children and the sound of merriment, there was another sound, a quiet, steady whisper, like a breath through the old brick lanes and narrow streets. Some said it was the wind through the chimneys. Others said it was something much older, the echo of the Christmases that had passed before, and the spirits that stayed to remember them. London, after all, was a city built in layers. History stacked upon history, story upon story. And on this night, as the frost grew deeper and the gas lights glimmered in the mist, the lines between past and present started to fade, just a little, like a dream that can't decide if it wants to disappear or remain. Somewhere in the center of the city, a bell rang the hour. Slow, careful, eerie, and with its last ring, the story of this forgotten Christmas started. Inside a small brick house on Fleet Street, warmth glowed against the cold. The Pembroke family, simple, respectable, and gentle, gathered near their small living room fire, its light shining on the polished brass and old furniture. The quiet ticking of a mantel clock filled the space between breaths. keeping time as softly as falling snow outside. Mr. Edward Pembroke, a newspaper clerk with ink-stained fingers and weary eyes, sat in his armchair by the fire. His wool waistcoat was buttoned tight, and the faint smell of pipe tobacco hung around him. His wife, Margaret, moved quietly around the room, placing down a tray of hot tea and a plate of shortbread sprinkled with sugar. Their children, Clara and Thomas, curled together on the rug, their cheeks pinked from the evening cold. "Papa," Clara said, looking up at her father, "will you tell us a Christmas story before bed? Please, a spooky one." Her brother's eyes grew wide, excited, but their mother frowned gently from her chair. "Not tonight, Clara. It's Christmas Eve. Let us keep the spirits of kindness and peace, not the other kind." Mr. Pembroke laughed quietly to himself. "Ah, but my dear, in the old times, Christmas Eve was when the spirits were most active." He leaned forward, his voice falling into that storyteller's sound that made the firelight seem to move. "Our ancestors thought that the line between the living and the dead grew thin on this night, that those long gone could walk once more among us, looking for warmth or memory." Clara's eyes shone. "And have you ever seen one, Papa?" He smiled. "Not with my own eyes, maybe, but the stories say that spirits often come to the homes where their names are still said, where a candle burns to welcome them back." Margaret trembled slightly, though the fire was warm. "You'll scare them," she whispered. But even she couldn't help looking toward the window, where frost spread like silver lace across the glass. Outside, a carriage went by, its wheels breaking the snow, its lamps shining like twin stars in the fog. The sound faded slowly until the only thing left was the snap and crackle of the fire. Mr. Pembroke reached for his pipe, pressed it gently, and said, "Well, there's an old story I remember. One about a man who saw something odd on Christmas Eve long ago. Maybe just a trick of the light, or maybe not." He smiled slightly. "Would you like to hear it?" The children nodded excitedly. The clock struck 8. The tea steamed softly, and outside the snow fell harder. Somewhere far away, a church bell rang. And in that warm little living room, as the family moved closer to the fire, the night seemed to listen too, as if the old city itself wanted to hear what would be told next. The clock on the mantel struck 9 with a hollow, steady rhythm, and the house had grown quiet. The children had gone to bed long ago, tucked under heavy blankets that smelled slightly of lavender and coal smoke. Mrs. Pembroke sat by the window for a while, looking out at the snow, her reflection dim against the glass, a shadowy double of herself floating just beyond the frost. "Do come away from the cold, my dear," her husband said softly. "In a moment," she answered. "It's so lovely tonight. Look, the lamps across the street look like stars that have fallen to earth." He came to her, putting an arm around her shoulders. Together they watched the snow moving past the lamplight, each flake falling slowly, silently, as if time itself had chosen to pause. Then Margaret sighed, closed the curtains, and went to get ready for bed, her footsteps fading down the hall. Edward Pembroke stayed behind, alone with the quiet sound of the fire and the remaining smell of her perfume. He had one candle burning on the windowsill, a family habit, one he'd kept since he was a boy. His mother used to say it was a light for the tired traveler, or for any spirit wandering the night. Some called it tradition, others called it superstition. He didn't quite know which he believed anymore. The flame trembled in the slight breeze, its light casting soft shadows across the wallpaper, shapes that reached, moved, and disappeared again. Edward puffed on his pipe and stared into the glow, soothed by the movement of it. The longer he looked, the less it seemed like a flame at all, and more like a person, a dark shape within the glass, standing under the street lamp outside. He blinked, leaned forward. There, through the layer of frost, stood a man, or what appeared to be one, tall still, wrapped in a dark coat that touched the tops of his boots. No lantern, no hat, no sound of footsteps in the snow, just quiet. The figure's face was turned toward the Pembroke home, pale and hard to read through the mist. Edward's breath stopped. He stood and went to the window. The glass was cold beneath his fingers. He wiped a small circle clear to see better, but the moment he did, the figure lowered its head slowly, almost respectfully, and then faded like a breath pulled back into the fog. The candle flickered hard, burning low, then steadied once more. Edward stood there a long time, heart beating softly, the taste of smoke and fear mixing in the back of his throat. Finally, he whispered to himself, "A trick of the light, nothing more." He closed the curtains, gently set his pipe aside, and turned toward the dying fire. Yet behind those closed curtains, the frost patterns began to change, swirling and moving into the faint outline of a shape, a tall figure, a lowered head. Outside, the snow kept falling. When morning came, the city woke beneath a world of silence and white. Every rooftop, carriage, and chimney top lay buried under the thick quiet of snow. The Pembroke home looked like a picture, smoke rising gently from its chimney, icicles shining like crystal teeth along the edges. Inside, the quiet noise of breakfast dishes echoed through the living room as Mrs. Pembroke set the table, her cheeks pink from the cold. Edward sat by the window again, looking absently at the pale light outside. The candle he had left burning through the night had melted almost to its base. Only a pool of wax remained, hard and cool. He ran a thumb along the glass, wiping away frost, and then stopped. There, marked faintly into the pane, were marks, long curved lines, as though something or someone had pressed against the window from the outside. Not scratches, not cracks, but impressions. They formed the faint outline of a handprint. "Margaret," he called quietly, not wanting to worry the children in the next room. "Come here, will you?" She came over, drying her hands on her apron. "What is it?" He pointed to the glass. "Look there." Her brow wrinkled. "Oh, it's probably from condensation," she said, though her voice lacked certainty. "Maybe one of the children touched it before bed. They were asleep before I sat down," Edward murmured. "And this? This is on the outside." The two stood there in silence, watching as the light moved across the frosted surface. The print began to fade as the morning sun warmed the glass until it disappeared completely. Margaret forced a smile. "It's Christmas Day," she said softly. "No need to fill it with ghost stories." He nodded, though his thoughts were elsewhere. Outside, a caroller's voice drifted down the street, clear, high, and eerily beautiful. The sound moved through the narrow lanes like smoke. Children laughed somewhere nearby, their boots breaking in the snow. Yet beneath it all, Edward felt that same quiet worry settle over him again, like a hand upon his shoulder. The memory of the lowered figure from the night before stayed in his mind. He tried to remember the man's face, but found he could not. It was as though the fog itself had formed him, faceless, silent, and gone. Later that afternoon, while the children played near the fireplace and Margaret hummed as she prepared dinner, Edward stepped out onto the steps. The cold met him like a living thing, sharp and close. The air smelled of smoke and pine, the sky the color of pewter. He looked down at the snow around his doorstep. Untouched, unmarked, no footprints, no sign that anyone had stood there at all. Only the faint remaining shape of frost on the window behind him, shining slightly in the weak winter sun. That evening the fog rolled in from the Thames like a slow, ghostly wave. It moved through the narrow streets and wrapped around lampposts, softening the world into shades of gold and gray. From within that mist came music, far away at first, then clearer as the sound came near. Voices rose in harmony, sweet and sad, echoing between the brick walls of Fleet Street. "God rest you merry, gentlemen." The carollers appeared out of the fog, like spirits themselves. 4 figures cloaked and hatted, carrying small lanterns that glowed like floating embers. They moved from door to door, their song moving through the night air like a lullaby for the tired city. Inside the Pembroke home, Clara pressed her face to the window pane. "Mama, the singers are here," she cried, breath fogging the glass. Margaret smiled and got a few coins from the sideboard. "Here, love, give this to them, and thank them kindly." Edward followed her to the door, his earlier worry lessened by the gentle melody. He opened the door to the drifting fog, and the voices grew fuller, wrapping around him like velvet. The Carollers stood close now. 3 men and 1 woman, each bundled against the cold, their cheeks glowing and their eyes shining in the candlelight. Yet there was something odd about their stillness. Between verses, they didn't move or adjust as most people would in such cold air. They simply stood quiet and still, waiting for the next line to start. The woman at the front nodded politely as Clara offered the coins. "Bless you, child," she whispered, her voice soft as breath. Edward felt a flash of recognition. Something about her face, pale, timeless, framed in a black bonnet, seemed familiar, though he could not say why. Perhaps he had seen her at church or in passing on the street. When the song ended, he meant to thank them, but before he could speak, the fog grew thicker. It moved between them in slow curling wisps, and when it cleared, the Carollers were gone. Not walking away, not fading down the street, simply gone. The road beyond lay empty, the snow unbroken, save for Edward's own footprints at the door. He looked up and down the lane. No voices, no lantern glow, no echo of song, only silence and the faint hum of the city beyond the fog. Clara tugged his sleeve. "Papa, where did they go?" He swallowed. "Perhaps to another house, my dear." But even as he said it, he knew the lie. The sound of caroling had stopped completely. From somewhere behind him, the clock chimed 10. The fog pressed close against the window panes like a living thing, and the candle by the sill trembled as though it too had heard the voices that were no longer there. The following morning dawned pale and still, the kind of winter light that seemed to remove all color from the world. London was quiet again, almost too quiet, as if the city itself was unwilling to wake. Snow lay deep in the gutters, quieting every sound. The fog from the night before stayed in thin ribbons, curling above the rooftops and along the church spires. Edward Pembroke rose early, unable to sleep after the strange disappearance of the Carollers. His thoughts had been restless, mixed with questions that had no shape. He dressed in silence, careful not to wake Margaret or the children, and slipped out into the cold. The air bit sharply at his cheeks as he walked down Fleet Street. A smell of soot and chimney smoke clung to everything, mixed with the faint sweetness of baking bread from a nearby shop. A milkman passed with his cart, its wheels breaking in the snow, the bottles rattling softly like fragile bells. Edward's destination was St. Matthew's Church just 3 streets away, an old stone building with a clock tower that had stood since before his father's time. He'd attended services there since boyhood, yet this morning it seemed different. The snow around it lay untouched, smooth as glass, and the great wooden doors were shut tight. He paused at the steps, staring up at the spire. The bell above should have rung the hour by now, but the air was empty of sound. Even the pigeons that usually sat along the ledges were gone. He made his way closer, the snow creaking beneath his boots. The moment his hand touched the iron latch of the door, he felt it, a vibration, faint but real, humming through the metal. He froze, listening. Then from deep within the tower came a single low note. Not loud, not bright, just a slow, deep toll that seemed to move through the still air. Once, twice, 3 times. Each tone stayed far longer than it should have, stretching into silence before the next began. Edward frowned. The church bells never rang at this hour, not unless for service or death. The third toll faded into nothing, leaving behind an echo that seemed to cling to the stones themselves. The snow beneath his boots trembled slightly. Or perhaps it was only his imagination. He stepped back from the door. "Just the wind," he murmured aloud, though there was no wind to be felt. Old wood, old metal. Still, as he turned to leave, his eyes moved to the churchyard beside the building. Through the thin fog, he could see the headstones, rows of pale marble, half buried in snow, their words softened by time. One stone stood newer than the rest, its carving still sharp and clean. A single name caught the light where the frost had melted upon it. Amelia Pembroke, 1857-1889. His breath caught, his mother. The candle, the lowered figure, the whisper in the frost, all came back in an instant. And now this, the tolling of a bell that no one else had heard. He stood there a long while, unmoving, his heart beating softly in the silence. When he finally looked up at the tower again, a shadow passed behind one of the arched windows. The air inside the churchyard felt heavier than the street beyond, as though the snow here carried the weight of years. Edward moved slowly between the headstones, his boots sinking with a soft crunch. Frost covered the iron gates and curled around the bare branches of yews that had stood for generations. Each one leaned slightly inward, their black limbs creaking under the weight of the ice. He stopped before his mother's grave, the one whose name he had just read through the mist. The snow lay gently over the stone, soft as a shroud. He crouched, brushed it clear with his gloved hand, and traced the carved letters. Amelia Pembroke, beloved mother and wife. The memory of her voice came back to him. Low, kind, always with that slight warm lilt that could make even a drafty house feel safe. She had died just last year, taken by a fever that came too quickly for the doctor to stop. He had not been with her at the very end. That thought still bothered quietly at his conscience. "I've tried to keep the candle burning," he whispered, the words clouding in the cold air, "just as you taught me. I thought perhaps it might reach you somehow." A faint breeze moved through the graveyard then, though no leaves stirred. It was a soft motion, like a sigh through the air, not cold, but oddly gentle. He glanced upward, expecting to see the first flakes of snow. Yet the sky above was a dull, unmoving gray. Then came a sound, the softest crunch of snow behind him. He turned quickly. A figure stood near the edge of the churchyard path, half hidden by the fog, tall, still, wrapped in a long coat. Its presence was quiet but certain, like a shape drawn out of the air itself. "Good morning," Edward called, forcing his voice to remain steady. No answer. The figure didn't move. He took a careful step forward. The snow whispered beneath his boots. "Forgive me. Are you from the parish?" Still nothing. The stranger's head tilted slightly, just enough for Edward to see the faint gleam of a pale face. Or perhaps it was merely the reflection of light upon frost. Then very slowly, the figure raised its hand, not in greeting, but in a gesture that seemed almost calling. Edward felt a chill move through him, though the air remained still. His instinct told him to turn back. Yet something deeper, something born of memory and longing, pushed him forward instead. He took one more step, and the world seemed to change. The sounds of the city faded. No distant wheels, no bells, not even the murmur of wind. Only his breath and the crunch of his boots in snow. When he reached the spot where the figure had stood, the fog moved once, and it was gone. But on the ground before him lay something small and shining, half buried in the snow. A brass button, dulled with age, carved with a pattern he knew too well. It was the same as the buttons on the overcoat he buried his mother in. Edward knelt in the snow, his breath shallow, misting before him. The brass button lay cold in his palm, its surface warm but unmistakable. the same fancy swirl design his mother's coat had had. He remembered fastening it himself on that bitter February morning a year ago, hands shaking as the undertaker's men waited by the door. The weight of that memory settled on him now, as heavy as the frost-filled air. He turned the button over, brushing away a layer of snow. Beneath the dirt, a faint warmth seemed to pulse through it. Perhaps only the echo of his touch, or perhaps something else. He closed his fingers around it instinctively, as though afraid the fog might steal it back. The church bell remained silent now, and the graveyard lay quiet once more. Yet the stillness had changed. It was no longer the peaceful quiet of morning, but something deeper, watchful. Edward felt eyes on him, though there was no one in sight. He rose slowly, looking around the gravestones. The fog clung low, curling around the marble like restless smoke. Somewhere far off, a crow called once, the sound sharp as breaking glass, and then even that faded. He slipped the button into his coat pocket and turned toward the church door. Its heavy wood loomed before him, the iron hinges covered with ice. He paused only a moment before pushing. To his surprise, it opened with a low groan. Inside, the air was colder, still, thick with the smell of damp stone and extinguished candles. The pews were empty, their surfaces dusted with frost. Light filtered weakly through the stained glass windows, painting the floor in muted colors that barely reached the altar. Edward's footsteps echoed down the aisle, muffled yet clear. He paused halfway down, heart quickening. Someone had been there recently. On the front pew, a single candle burned, its flame steady and upright, untouched by draught. Beside it sat an old prayer book, its pages open, though no one was near. He stepped closer, drawn by that tiny, steady flame. It was an ordinary candle, yet its light seemed knowing. The way it burned reminded him of home, of the one he had left glowing on his own windowsill. And then he noticed something that made his breath stop. The open page of the prayer book bore no words of scripture. Instead, pressed carefully between the pages, lay a small square of yellowed paper. A handwritten note, the ink brown and faded. He bent to read it. Keep the light burning. For those who wonder, it shows the way back. The writing was neat, careful, and terribly familiar. He knew that script. He had seen it on old letters, grocery lists, and birthday cards long ago. It was his mother's handwriting. Edward's hand trembled as he reached for the paper. The air around him felt suddenly heavy, thick with meaning. He could almost hear her voice, distant and soft. "Don't let the light go out, my dear." The candle flickered as if stirred by invisible breath. He stood there a long while, the brass button warm in his pocket, the note shaking in his hand. And somewhere high above, hidden within the shadowed rafters, came the faintest sound, a whisper, or perhaps only the sigh of the old church settling in the cold. Edward's eyes rose slowly toward the rafters, where the sound had come from. The church's ceiling arched high above him, a vault of shadow and timber beams blackened with soot and time. Between the faint beams of light that filtered through the colored glass, the air shimmered slightly, as though stirred by movement unseen. The whisper came again, soft, breathless, impossible to place. It wasn't words, not exactly, more like a sigh caught between echoes. He felt a chill climb the back of his neck. The candle on the pew trembled, but did not go out. Its small flame stretched upward, pulling at the air as though reaching towards something beyond sight. Edward turned in slow circles, scanning the silent rows of pews, the stone archways, the pulpit. The church was utterly still, and yet he was certain he was not alone. Gathering courage, he moved toward the narrow staircase that wound up to the belfry. Each wooden step creaked underfoot, brittle with age. The sound of his own breathing seemed too loud, too human. Halfway up, the whisper came again, closer this time. Just behind him, he froze. "Who's there?" he said softly. Only silence. And faintly the scent of lilacs drifted through the cold, faint, but unmistakable. His mother's favorite flower. Impossible here in this frozen place. But the perfume lingered, surrounding him with a sudden, aching familiarity. He pressed onward. The staircase spiraled into darkness, lit only by the dim light seeping up from below. When he reached the belfry, the air was colder still. Frost coated the great iron bell in delicate feathers, shining faintly in the gloom. The ropes hung stiff and unmoving. Edward's gaze moved toward the open archways that looked down upon the city. The fog still lay thick over London, but above it the faintest streak of pale light broke through. Dawn's first breath, and then he saw it. In the far corner, near the base of the bell, something moved, a soft rustle like fabric brushing stone. He turned sharply, pulse quickening. At first, he saw only a figure's outline, faint as if shaped from smoke. A woman standing still, her hands clasped before her. The light from the archway caught her just enough for him to see the edge of her face. Pale, calm, familiar. "Mother." The whisper came again, but this time it was not from above or behind. It came from her, clear and gentle, like wind moving through reeds. "The light, Edward. Keep it burning." The sound moved through him. He took a step forward, his heart caught between grief and disbelief. "Is it truly you?" Her form flickered slightly, as though a candle flame moved inside her shape. She raised one hand, translucent, delicate, and pointed toward the tower's open window, where the weak daylight touched the frost. "Others have lost their way," she said, her voice a breath against the cold. "But not all lights are meant for the living alone." He wanted to speak again, to ask what she meant. But the air grew bright suddenly, not harsh, but blindingly soft, as if the fog itself had turned to light. When his vision cleared, the belfry was empty. Only the still bell remained, its iron skin slick with frost. Edward stood there for a long time, his breath shaking in the silence. Then slowly he went down the steps, one hand over the pocket that held the brass button, warm now, as though holding a pulse. Edward returned to the churchyard with the weight of the morning pressing on him. The snow had deepened while he was inside. Each step left a crisp, echoing mark behind him. The fog had grown thicker, curling in low wisps that hid the street beyond. London seemed suspended, as if time itself had slowed in respect to something older, something hidden. He stopped beside his mother's grave once more, brushing the snow from the marble, the brass button pressed warmly into his pocket, as if reminding him of her presence, even in absence. His mind went back to the night before, the lowered figure, the fleeting corollers, the whispers in the belfry, and a shiver ran down his spine. It was in that shiver that Edward realized. Perhaps these weren't merely strange events. Perhaps the city itself remembered, carried memories of Christmases long past, of lights kept burning, of souls who wandered and waited. He thought of all the forgotten traditions his mother had once described, the hanging of holly to protect the house, the placement of a candle for the unseen traveler, the leaving of a slice of bread for the robin at the window. Small gestures meant to honor both the living and those who had come before. Each memory seemed to stir within the fog around him. The wind whispered faintly, rustling the bare branches above. And for a moment, Edward could swear he saw shadows moving among the tombstones, not threatening, but alive, like echoes of laughter and song. He bent to scoop up a handful of snow and pressed it to his face, tasting the crisp, almost metallic chill. It reminded him of long-ago winters, sleigh rides along frozen ponds, the warmth of the kitchen fireplace, the smell of roasting chestnuts carried on the evening air. The fog shifted again, curling low around the gravestones. For a moment, Edward thought he saw movement, tiny figures, fleeting glimpses at the edges of his vision, like children laughing in a street long since gone. A sudden warmth passed through him, gentle yet insistent, as if urging him to remember the joy, not just the fear. And then, in the stillness, he heard it again. A soft carol carried faintly on the wind, not distant this time, not from memory, but here, present, real. Edward stood perfectly still, listening. The notes rose and fell in the quiet, each one slow and careful, filled with a strange tenderness. Somewhere in that melody, he recognized a tune his mother had hummed on Christmas mornings, a tune he had almost forgotten. The warmth of the candle, the brass button, the lingering whispers, and the distant melody all merged into a strange comfort. It was as if the past itself had reached out through the fog to remind him that even in absence, love could last. And as he listened, the fog seemed to part just slightly, revealing the faint glow of windows further down the street, lights burning softly in homes, much like his own. Edward smiled slightly. Perhaps, he thought, this was what Christmas truly meant. A light for those who wandered, a song for those who remembered, and a warmth that could cross the boundary between the living and the departed. As the afternoon faded, Edward decided to return home, the brass button still warm in his pocket, and the memory of his mother's presence staying like a gentle sigh. The snow crunched softly beneath his boots, each step echoing faintly against the brick walls of the narrow street. The fog clung low, wrapping the city in a muted gray cloak, softening the edges of reality and memory alike. Gas lamps flickered along the way, their golden light pooling on the snow and giving it the glow of molten silver. Edward noticed tiny footprints pressed into the powder along the pavement. Children perhaps, or someone else walking before him. For a moment he considered following them, but they vanished into a side alley, swallowed by shadows and frost. He passed a small square where a fountain had frozen into a delicate sculpture of ice. The water, caught mid-splash by winter's hand, shone like crystal under the dim lamplight. A robin hopped along the edge, pecking at a stray crumb, oblivious to the chill. Edward paused and watched it for a moment, its tiny chest rising and falling with effort. Somehow, its simple presence brought a wave of peace over him. Then he remembered the candle, the one he had left burning in his window the night before. He quickened his steps, anxious to see if its flame had survived the night. Each breath puffed into the air in soft clouds, each exhale tasting of frost and cold smoke. When he reached home, the candle was still there. The flame wavered slightly in the draft that slipped under the door, but it remained upright, golden, and steady. Edward knelt before it, brushing the frost from the windowsill. The light seemed alive, a tiny beacon of warmth amid the gray world outside. He whispered softly, "For you, Mother, for anyone who wanders tonight." The room seemed to sigh in response. The fire in the fireplace crackled, the scent of burning wood mixing with the candle's wax. And outside the snow continued to fall, thick and unbroken, each flake settling silently, covering the world in a hushed perfection. Edward remained kneeling there for some time, listening to the quiet symphony of winter, the distant toll of a bell, the faint creak of frost-laden branches, and the soft flutter of the candle's flame. Somewhere beyond the street, a choir sang faintly, carried by the fog, not visible, not tangible, yet undeniably present. And as he leaned closer to the flame, Edward realized that even in the midst of silence and shadow, there was light, fragile, persistent, and lasting. A light for the living, a light for the departed, a light to guide all who wandered home. Evening settled more fully over London, softening the edges of the city into shadowed shapes. Edward lingered by the candle in his window, the room around him bathed in golden warmth. The children had been tucked into bed hours ago, their breathing slow and steady, muffled by thick quilts. Margaret had gone to bed as well, leaving Edward alone with the quiet hum of the fire and the gentle fall of snow outside. A faint sound drifted in through the frosted panes. A single note at first, almost impossible to hear, then another and another, weaving into a melody that seemed familiar yet strangely distant. Edward's heart stirred. It was a carol, not one he knew from church or songbooks, but a haunting, lilting tune that seemed to rise from the very walls of the city itself. He opened the window slightly, allowing the winter air to brush against his face. The sound carried more clearly now, delicate and ethereal, as though sung by invisible voices moving through the fog. It was the kind of song that could pull at the memory of a lifetime, stirring old joys and sorrows alike. Edward closed his eyes, letting the music wash over him. The notes were soft, winding through the street, curling around lampposts and rooftops, drifting into every corner of the snow-filled city. He could almost feel the footsteps of those who had sung it centuries ago, their presence folded into each rise and fall of the melody. When he opened his eyes, the candlelight seemed brighter, the room warmer, and yet the outside world had shifted. The fog parted slightly, revealing shadows that moved with purpose. Fleeting glimpses of figures gliding along the street, not threatening, but serene, deliberate, as if carried along by the song itself. Edward realized with a start that the music was coming closer. He could hear the faint shuffle of boots in the snow, the soft rustle of fabric, and then, just outside his window, a shadow paused. A small child wrapped in layers of wool stood alone in the snow, holding a lantern that glimmered with golden light. The child's face was pale in the lamp glow, and their eyes, wide, searching, met Edward's through the glass. The melody lifted to a high note, the candle flickered in agreement, and Edward felt an unexplainable warmth, as if the music itself had touched something deep inside him. The child raised a tiny hand pointing toward the street beyond. Edward sensed, without knowing why, that the song was not just for him. It was a call, an invitation to remember. And as the candlelight danced across the room, Edward understood that this Christmas, unlike any other, would be guided not only by memory and love, but by the quiet, persistent light of those who had wandered before. Edward wrapped his coat tighter around his shoulders and stepped outside, drawn by the glow of the small lantern in the child's hands. The snow crunched underfoot, muffled by the thick fog curling around the street lamps. Each breath came in small clouds tinged with the faint scent of wood smoke and frost. The child stood quietly, still as a statue, the lantern's flame flickering with the wind. Their eyes, wide and luminous, seemed to hold a wisdom beyond their years, as if they had witnessed countless winters, and yet carried no fear. Edward's steps drew nearer, and the child tilted their head slightly, inviting him to follow. Together they moved down the narrow lane. The fog thickened around them, softening the edges of the world. The distant church bell tolled once low and deliberate, and the sound resonated through the frozen air. Somewhere in the background, the faintest echo of carols drifted like a lullaby from another time. Edward noticed footprints in the snow, small, precise, and careful. The child's were easy to follow, but alongside them were other prints, larger, deeper, as if another presence had walked there just moments before. He glanced toward the mist, half expecting to see a figure. The child stopped near a small wrought iron gate that led into a narrow courtyard. The fog parted slightly here, revealing a weathered stone fountain at its center, now frozen and glittering like glass. Edward leaned closer, brushing away snow from the fountain's basin. Beneath the ice he saw faint reflections, not of himself, but of figures dressed in long coats and bonnets, frozen mid-step, caught in the quiet of another Christmas long ago. The child pointed to the reflections, and Edward felt a shiver that was not entirely from cold. The figures seemed to call him, urging him to remember, to listen, to honor the moments that had been lost to time. A sudden gust of wind lifted the fog like a curtain, revealing the outline of a small ancient shop across the courtyard, its windows aglow filled with flickering candlelight. Something about it felt familiar, though Edward could not place it. He sensed that whatever lay inside held answers, or perhaps more questions. The child's tiny hand tugged gently at his sleeve, pulling him forward. "Come," the whisper seemed to say, though no words were spoken aloud. Edward took a deep breath, feeling the warmth of the candle in his pocket pulse against his chest, and stepped toward the shop, the crunch of his boots mixing with the soft, haunting echo of carols carried on the winter wind. Edward approached the shop slowly, each step muffled by the thick snow that lined the courtyard. The windows were fogged from within, yet the warm glow spilling out promised comfort and something almost magical. The wooden sign above the door creaked gently in the wind, revealing only the faintest letters, Marmon's Curiosities. He hesitated, glancing at the child, whose small hand still rested lightly on his sleeve. The figure nodded slightly, as if encouraging him to enter. Edward took a deep breath, opened the door, and was immediately surrounded by warmth and scent. Candle wax, aged paper, and the faintest hint of spices, cinnamon, clove, and nutmeg, carried through the air like whispers of forgotten Christmases. Inside, the shop was narrow, but packed with curiosities. Shelves lined with tarnished brass candlesticks, glass bottles filled with colored powders, dried herbs tied with twine, and small figurines carved from wood. Every surface seemed to hum with quiet energy, as though the objects themselves held stories wanting to be remembered. A bell tinkled softly as the door closed behind him. Edward turned slowly, scanning the room, and for a moment he saw no one. Then from the back of the shop, a faint rustle of fabric. A woman appeared, pale and small, her eyes reflecting the warm candlelight. Her clothing seemed old-fashioned, as though she had stepped from another era. "Welcome," she said softly, her voice gentle and calm, yet carrying a weight of centuries. "I've been expecting you, Edward Pembroke." His heart skipped. How do you know my name?" She smiled slightly. "Names linger here, especially those who keep their lights burning. You've done well to follow the child." Edward glanced down, but the child who had guided him moments ago had vanished. Only the soft glow of candles and the scent of spices remained. The woman motioned toward a table in the center of the shop, where a single candle burned beside a small open book. The pages were yellowed, filled with flowing handwriting and delicate sketches, holly wreaths, candle arrangements, and notes about traditions long forgotten. "These are the old ways," she said, "the ways that keep spirits near and hearts warm. You have been chosen to remember to carry them forward." Edward felt a mix of awe and unease. The brass button in his pocket pulsed faintly, as if confirming her words. He opened his hand, holding it out, and the candlelight seemed to brighten slightly in response. Outside, the fog thickened once more, curling against the shop windows. But inside, Edward felt a sense of calm he had not known since his mother's passing. For the first time that day, he understood that Christmas was not just about the living or the dead alone. It was about the light they shared, guiding one another across the boundaries of time. Edward stepped closer to the table, drawn by the open book and the candle that flickered gently beside it. The pages were fragile, worn with age, yet each line of ink seemed alive, as though the words themselves whispered the memory of every hand that had ever traced them. Illustrations of wreaths, lanterns, holly, and mistletoe filled the margins, delicate and precise, like sketches of forgotten holidays. The woman watched him quietly, her eyes calm but penetrating, as if she could see every thought passing through his mind. "This," she said, gesturing to the book, "is the book of forgotten traditions. Every year, many practices fade, their meanings lost to time. But those who remember, who act with care, keep the old spirits close." Edward ran a finger along the inked letters. The script was familiar, almost like his mother's handwriting, gentle loops and flowing lines that seemed to hum with a quiet energy. A shiver ran through him as he read the first entry. Place a candle in your window to guide the wandering spirits and protect your home. Speak their names softly on the wind, for they listen even when unseen. He glanced down at the brass button in his pocket, feeling its warmth. It was as if the object itself resonated with the instructions. The woman stepped closer, placing her hand lightly on the book. "There is more," she said. "Offerings for those who cannot walk among the living." A slice of bread on the windowsill, a bowl of water at the door, a whispered song, even a small gesture of remembrance is enough to keep them near. Edward's thoughts went to the night of the candle, the lowered figure outside his window, and the carollers who had vanished into the fog. Each strange encounter made sense now. He realized that his mother had guided him through memory and love toward this moment, toward understanding the delicate balance between the living and the departed. The child who had guided him here was nowhere in sight. Yet Edward felt a quiet presence at his side, as though unseen eyes were watching with gentle approval. He carefully turned the pages, discovering traditions for every aspect of the season, hanging sprigs of holly for protection, leaving toys for those who had none, lighting a fire, not only for warmth, but for remembrance. Every instruction carried warmth, a tender urging to act with mindfulness and care. Edward's heart swelled. "I see now," he whispered. "This is why the candle, the fog, the whispers, everything. It's all part of remembering." The woman nodded. "Yes, and now it is your turn to keep the light alive. Tonight you will act and others will follow. Christmas is a bridge, Edward. Not merely a date on the calendar, but a passage between those here and those gone, between memory and hope." The candle flickered again, and the warmth of its light seemed to spread through the shop, filling the corners and shelves with a golden glow. Outside the fog shifted, curling around the windows, but inside the air was still, filled with the quiet hum of lasting traditions. Edward closed the book gently, feeling the weight of responsibility settle softly on his shoulders. He understood now that he was not merely a witness, but a keeper, a guardian of light, memory, and song. Edward left the shop, carrying the book of forgotten traditions, carefully tucked under his arm. The fog had thickened in the streets, curling around the lampposts, and muffling the world into quiet silver shadows. Each breath he drew was sharp and clean, the taste of snow and winter staying in his mouth. Returning home, he found Margaret arranging the last tray of cookies for the children, their little hands already drifting to the treats in anticipation. "Edward," she said softly, noticing his quiet expression, "you've been gone so long. Was everything all right?" He nodded, placing the book carefully on the sideboard. "Yes, I've learned something important. Something I think we should do tonight." Margaret tilted her head in curiosity, her eyes warm with understanding. "What is it?" Edward began gathering supplies, candles of different sizes, matches, and a small bowl of water. He told Margaret about the traditions, the candles in the windows, offerings for wandering spirits, songs for the forgotten. She listened quietly, her face reflecting a mixture of wonder and reverence. Together, they began preparing the windows. Each sill received a candle carefully centered and shielded from the draft with a glass lantern. A small bowl of water rested beside one, while another held a slice of bread lightly sprinkled with crumbs. As they worked, the children stirred from curiosity, eyes wide at the flickering flames and soft scents of beeswax and pine filling the room. Edward whispered the names of those who had passed in their family, just as the book instructed, and the candlelight seemed to respond, flickering warmly as if in acknowledgement. Margaret hummed softly, a melody she had learned from her mother long ago, the tune blending with the crackle of the hearth fire. Outside, the fog thickened, curling against the windows like gentle fingers. The lights inside the Pembroke home glowed brighter in contrast, a beacon cutting through the gray mist. Edward paused for a moment, looking at the row of candles he and Margaret had placed, their flames dancing softly, sending ribbons of light outward. He felt the presence of his mother again, a whisper in the warmth of the room, the faint scent of lilacs staying at the edges of the air. The brass button in his pocket pulsed faintly, as if confirming that their preparations were correct. "Tonight," Edward murmured, "we honor them. We keep the light alive," Margaret nodded. The children, understanding more than words, settled quietly on the rug, their small hands folded, eyes reflecting the soft glow of the candles. Outside, the fog moved, carrying a faint echo of carols, a promise that even in silence the city remembered. As night deepened over London, the Pembroke house glowed warmly against the gray fog outside. The candles on the windowsills cast gentle reflections on the falling snow, and the hearth fire crackled in the center of the room, filling the space with a comforting rhythm. Edward and Margaret had finished their preparations, and the children lay tucked beneath blankets, their breaths slow and even, soothed by the soft warmth. A sudden knock at the door drew Edward's attention. The sound was cautious, almost hesitant, but clear against the muffled quiet of the night. He glanced at Margaret, who gave a small nod and moved toward the door, the brass button in his pocket pressing warmly against his chest. When he opened it, he found a small figure standing in the snow. A young man, thin and shivering, holding a lantern that flickered in the winter wind. His clothing was worn, and his cheeks were pale from the cold. Despite the fog, his eyes seemed bright and alert, filled with both wonder and fear. "Good evening, sir," Edward said gently. "Come in quickly. You'll catch your death of cold out there." The young man stepped inside gratefully, brushing snow from his coat. "Thank you, sir," he murmured. I was walking through the streets and saw your lights. They drew me here." Edward's heart lifted. This was exactly what the traditions had promised. The lights would guide those who wandered. "You are welcome here," he said softly. "You are not alone tonight." Margaret offered the young man a warm blanket and a cup of tea. The scent of honey and spice filled the air as he accepted it, hands shaking as he brought the cup to his lips. The children peeked from their blankets, curious but silent, drawn to the gentle energy in the room. Edward guided the young man to the window with the candles. "Tonight," he said, "we honor those who have come before us, and those who are here now. These lights are for them, and for anyone who finds their way in the fog." The young man's eyes widened as he gazed at the glowing candles. Outside, the snow fell steadily, thick and soft, quieting the city sounds. The fog seemed to pause, moving around the house, holding the moment still. For a long time they stood together by the window, the warmth of the room and the flickering candlelight offering comfort and hope. The young man's breath slowed, his shoulders relaxed, and Edward realized that even in the smallest gestures, a candle, a song, a warm drink, the traditions carried a powerful magic. And outside, somewhere in the fog, faint carols drifted closer, the notes brushing softly against the ears of all who would listen, guiding them gently toward the light. After the young man had warmed himself by the fireplace, Edward suggested they share a song, a carol long forgotten by the city, but preserved in the book of forgotten traditions. Margaret and the children joined them, forming a small circle around the candlelit windowsill. The warmth of the room seemed to settle over them, softening the edges of the winter night outside. Edward opened the book to a page filled with delicate script and musical notation. The melody was simple, flowing like a gentle stream, yet filled with a haunting tenderness that reached deep into the heart. He cleared his throat softly, and Margaret's voice joined his low and steady as the children hummed along. Outside, the fog thickened, moving around the glowing windows, carrying the faintest echoes of their song across the silent streets. Each note seemed to ripple through the winter air, brushing against the rooftops and cobblestones, awakening long-forgotten memories hidden in the hearts of those who had wandered through London. The young man listened intently, eyes wide, feeling something he had not known before, a sense of connection, of belonging, even in the cold and darkness. He realized the song was not just for them, not just for the house, but for all who had been lost, all who had wandered without guidance, all who had longed to be remembered. Edward's voice quivered slightly as he sang the final verse, and the children's soft humming completed the melody. The candle flames flickered in response, casting dancing shadows along the walls. For a moment, the room seemed suspended in time, the outside world nothing more than a blurred watercolor of fog and snow. When the song ended, there was a deep silence, a kind that holds its breath, aware of the magic staying in the air. Edward glanced at the young man who was blinking slowly, his expression touched with awe. "They can hear us," Edward whispered. "Those we remember, they are near tonight, and our song calls to them, guiding them closer." Margaret reached for his hand, their fingers entwined. The children snuggled closer, and the young man stood quietly, taking in the warmth and the quiet power of remembrance. Beyond the fog, a faint movement seemed to ripple along the streets. Shadows that had been mere blurs now took tentative shapes. Figures wrapped in coats of the past, some carrying lanterns, others holding tiny gifts. They moved with care, drawn by the song and the light, approaching the Pembroke home. And as Edward watched, a sense of calm settled over him, deep and comforting, like the embrace of memory itself. Tonight he realized the forgotten were not lost. They were simply waiting to be remembered. The soft, lingering notes of the carol still floated in the Pembroke home when Edward heard a gentle tapping at the front door. Not the hurried knock of a stranger, but deliberate, patient, almost shy. He exchanged a glance with Margaret. The children stirred in their blankets, eyes wide with curiosity. Edward opened the door slowly, and the fog rolled inward, curling around the threshold like living silk. There, standing in the snow, were more figures, not menacing or cold, but hesitant, fragile in appearance, as if the world had forgotten them. Children, elderly men and women, and a few familiar faces from Edward's memories. Neighbors long gone, friends of his mother, even a figure he could swear was his own grandmother, smiling slightly beneath the haze of frost. The lanterns they carried cast a soft wavering glow. Their breath plumed in the frosty air, and faint laughter, gentle and musical, rose and fell like a wind chime, caught in a soft draught. They had come, guided by the candlelight in the windows, and the echoing melody of the song Edward had sung. "Welcome," Edward whispered, stepping forward. "Come in, all of you. You are safe here." The visitors moved forward, brushing snow from their shoulders. Inside, the warmth of the fire wrapped around them like a blanket, the scent of cinnamon and pine welcoming them fully. The young man, who had arrived earlier, watched in awe as the figures smiled slightly, acknowledging Edward and Margaret's hospitality. Edward realized the truth of the traditions. The lights and songs were not merely symbolic. They were invitations, threads connecting the living and the departed, calling those who had wandered in time or in spirit back to the warmth of remembrance. The visitors settled quietly, sitting along the edges of the room, their eyes soft, observing. Some brought small worn items from their pockets. A tiny bell, a carved figurine, a sprig of holly. They placed them carefully near the candles, as if contributing to the ritual that had drawn them there. Edward knelt by the fireplace and whispered, "Let us honor them. Let us remember them tonight." And outside the fog moved in a slow, deliberate dance, revealing shapes in the streets, silhouettes of other wanderers, perhaps encouraged by the light to seek refuge. The soft fall of snow seemed to quiet the city, and even the distant bells of London tolled more gently, as if joining in this quiet vigil. Within the Pembroke home, the warmth, the candlelight, and the murmured prayers created a bubble of peace amid the cold, silent city. Tonight, Edward thought, the forgotten would not remain lost. Tonight, they would be seen, heard, and remembered. Edward moved carefully among the visitors, ensuring each felt welcome. Their expressions were serene, touched with relief, and their presence seemed to pull the warmth from the fireplace further into the room. The brass button in his pocket pulsed gently with each step he took, a reminder of the connection he had discovered, a bridge between memory and the living world. Margaret suggested they light additional candles to expand the circle of warmth. Together they placed small flames around the room, on tables, windowsills, and the mantelpiece. Each candle flickered as if recognizing the significance of its purpose. Slowly, the flickering lights formed a soft halo around everyone, bathing the room in golden amber. Edward led the young man to the center of the room, holding the open book of forgotten traditions before him. "Tonight," he said softly, "we create a circle of remembrance, of light, of hope. These traditions connect us all, living and departed alike. Tonight, no one wanders alone." The visitors moved closer, some holding hands, others simply leaning into the warmth of the circle. The children, encouraged by their parents, joined them, forming the smallest yet most earnest link in the chain. The air was thick with scents of beeswax pine and the faint trace of lilacs, and Edward could almost hear the pulse of the city itself slowing, matching with the rhythm of the fire, the breath of the group, the flicker of the flames. He opened the book, reading aloud a passage about the importance of voice and song. Margaret began softly singing the same carol from earlier. One by one the visitors joined in, some in wordless hums, others with full, gentle voices. The harmony was imperfect but beautiful, a weaving of sounds that seemed to stitch together centuries, drawing the departed closer, acknowledging the living with tenderness. Outside, the fog began to thin slightly, moving higher and revealing glimpses of rooftops, spires, and streets lined with snow. The lights of the Pembroke home glowed like a beacon in the mist. Those who lingered outside, shadows Edward could not fully see, seemed to pause, drawn to the warmth, their faint shapes staying just beyond the window panes. The circle of light inside the house strengthened, glowing not only from candles, but from presence, attention, and care. Edward realized that the traditions, the song, the candlelight, they were not merely rituals. They were invitations. Invitations to return, to remember, to reconnect, to heal. And in the midst of this growing warmth, Edward felt something he had not allowed himself to feel in months. Peace. A deep, quiet reassurance that the light he tended could reach beyond him, guiding others home, across time, across fog, and across the boundaries between living and departed. As the singing faded into gentle hums, Edward encouraged everyone to gather closer to the fireplace. The fire crackled, casting dancing shadows across the room, and the warm glow of the candles mixed with it, painting soft patterns on walls lined with framed portraits and shelves of trinkets. The visitors, once silent, began to share their stories. Soft-spoken tales of Christmases long past, memories of snowy streets, laughter by the fireplace, and moments of quiet solitude. An elderly man spoke of carols sung in his childhood, echoing across the frost-covered square outside his home. A young woman recalled the taste of spiced biscuits and cider, the smell of pine needles crushed underfoot. Even the children whispered their small experiences, tales of small joys and hidden fears. Edward listened, gently prompting when needed, realizing that these stories were as much part of the tradition as the candles or songs. Each memory was a thread weaving the circle tighter, binding the living and departed into one gentle fabric of remembrance. Margaret moved among the group, offering tea and small sweets. The scents of sugar, honey, and spices mixed with the candle wax and pine, creating an intoxicating warmth that seemed to pull the fog outside a little further back, as though the comfort inside could push against the cold outside. The young man, who had arrived earlier, still pale from the winter chill, began to speak hesitantly. He recounted nights spent wandering alone, seeking the warmth of a family he had lost, the loneliness that seemed heavier during the holidays. But here, by the flickering fire, and among the gathered circle, he felt safe, recognized, and welcomed. Edward glanced at the brass button in his pocket, feeling the warmth spread through him. The objects, the traditions, the lights, the stories, all were connected, all alive with memory. He realized that the circle they had created was not just a temporary refuge, but a living bridge, a safe harbor for all who had been forgotten or left wandering. The night deepened, snow falling quietly beyond the windows, quieting the city into silence. Faint echoes of carols still floated in the fog outside, as if the city itself were joining in the gentle vigil. The room with its fire, candles, and voices became a sanctuary, a place where time slowed, grief softened, and hope lasted. Edward's voice joined the murmured conversations as he said softly, "Tonight we remember them, and by remembering we keep the light alive." The visitors nodded, some with tears in their eyes, others with faint smiles. Each knew in their own way that they were part of something larger, a chain of remembrance that spanned both life and memory. After stories had been shared and the circle of warmth had settled, Edward felt a gentle tug, a subtle pull that reminded him of the fog outside and the candlelight guiding others home. He stepped to the window, gazing out at the snow-covered street. The fog moved lazily, thick and silvery, curling around lampposts and rooftops. Yet faint glimmers of light danced within it, like tiny stars hovering just above the ground. Through the haze, Edward noticed figures moving slowly along the street. They were drawn by the glow of the Pembroke home. Wanderers, souls seeking warmth and remembrance. Each carried a small lantern, some handmade, some borrowed, casting pale, trembling pools of light on the snow. Their movements were careful and deliberate, as though the snow itself carried a fragile rhythm that must be respected. He turned to the visitors still gathered inside. "Look," he whispered, pointing to the street. "Others are coming. The lights are guiding them here." Margaret and the children joined him at the window, faces pressed softly against the glass. The young man, who had arrived earlier, stepped close as well, wonder etched on his pale features. They watched silently as more shapes emerged from the fog, drawn forward by the promise of warmth, by the candlelight, by the quiet song still echoing in Edward's mind. Edward opened the door a crack, letting in the cold mist and the scent of snow. It was crisp, almost metallic, a reminder of the season's bite, yet it carried a subtle sweetness. The faint aroma of pine from distant trees, the delicate fragrance of lilacs carried on the wind. The first visitors stepped tentatively inside, brushing snow from their coats, nodding in gratitude at the glow of the room. The warmth of the house reached out to them, the candlelight reflecting softly in their eyes, and Edward felt a quiet satisfaction. The tradition was working. The circle was expanding, the light calling to those lost in fog and frost. Each arrival reinforced the idea that Christmas was not merely a celebration of the living, but a moment where the past and present could meet, if only one tended the flame. Edward's eyes moved to the brass button in his pocket. He pressed it lightly, feeling its warmth surge, as if echoing the collective presence of all those who had been guided here tonight. Outside, the fog began to shimmer faintly, the snowfall slowing as if to listen, the city holding its breath in gentle acknowledgement of the growing circle inside. The room had grown fuller now, filled with more visitors than Edward had expected, each arriving quietly, as if guided by the soft pulse of the candlelight. They settled in wherever space allowed, on chairs, cushions, and the edges of the hearthrug. Some leaned against the walls, still shivering lightly, while others simply closed their eyes and inhaled the warmth, letting the scents of pine, wax, and spice wrap around them like a protective blanket. Edward moved among them, quietly encouraging conversation. One elderly woman spoke of the snow-laden rooftops of her childhood, how her family would hang bright ribbons along the eaves and sing through the frosty mornings. Another man described a small village square where every Christmas Eve lanterns floated along the frozen river, carrying the wishes of children. Margaret, sensing the need for comfort, brought steaming mugs of tea and plates of spiced cookies. The visitors accepted the offerings with quiet gratitude, the warmth of the drink seeping slowly into chilled hands. And with each sip, the room seemed to grow cozier, more intimate. The gentle crackle of the fire merged with faint whispers and soft laughter, creating a lull of contentment that hovered above the group like a tangible presence. Edward paused to observe the children who had begun to speak softly to the visitors, asking questions about the old traditions and listening intently to the stories shared. Their innocence and curiosity brought a delicate brightness to the room, a reminder that memory and joy could be passed from generation to generation. The young man, still tentative, approached Edward. I never knew such things existed," he whispered. "I thought Christmas was just noise and decorations. But this feels different." Edward placed a reassuring hand on his shoulder. "It is different. Christmas in its truest form is remembering, connecting, and carrying light. Tonight, we honor the forgotten, and by doing so, we become part of something larger than ourselves." A soft wind rattled the window panes, and Edward glanced outside. Shadows moved once more in the fog. Hesitant figures paused at the edges of the street, drawn by the warm glow. The circle of light within the Pembroke home was not merely physical. It was magnetic, comforting, and alive, calling to those who wandered in the night. And as the stories continued, the murmured songs resumed, and the candlelight flickered gently. Edward understood that the night itself had slowed, wrapped in a hushed reverence, a pause in time to honor memory, hope, and the quiet magic of togetherness. Edward moved toward the fireplace, drawing the young man and a few of the visitors closer. Margaret had set out a small tray of treats, spiced cookies, crusty bread, and a bowl of dried fruit, the scent mingling with the warmth of the fire. Each visitor accepted a small portion, savoring it slowly, as if each bite connected them to forgotten Christmases and long-past winters. Edward dipped a piece of bread into a little honey and offered it to the young man, who took it hesitantly at first, then smiled, savoring the combination of sweetness and warmth. "It's comforting," he admitted, "like something I've been missing." Margaret handed out cups of steaming tea infused with cinnamon and clove. The vapor rose, carrying the scent through the room and brushing against the candle flames. The children leaned forward, inhaling the fragrant air, while some of the older visitors closed their eyes, letting the flavors stir memories of kitchens long gone, of family gatherings and soft laughter. Outside, the snow continued to fall silently, thick and unbroken, covering the streets and rooftops in a gentle quilt of white. The fog shifted thin enough now to reveal the faint glimmer of lanterns moving closer. More figures drawn to the warmth, the light, and the quiet magic within the Pembroke home. Edward moved among the visitors, offering another round of bread, a small spoonful of preserves, a piece of dried fruit. He noticed the subtle changes. Shoulders relaxing, eyes softening, smiles appearing where there had been tension. The simple act of sharing food, of honoring small traditions, seemed to strengthen the connection between them all. "The taste of winter," Edward murmured softly, almost to himself, "is not only cold air or snow, but the sweetness we carry with us, the warmth we share." Margaret nodded, setting her hand on his arm. "And by sharing it," she added, "we remember those who cannot be here, and we guide those who have been wandering. The fire crackled, the candlelight flickered, and Edward realized that this quiet circle with its stories, songs, and shared treats was transforming into something larger than themselves, a sanctuary where the past, present, and future met, all held together by warmth, remembrance, and the gentle rituals of Christmas. Edward stepped toward the window once more, drawn by a faint sound weaving through the stillness outside. The snow continued to fall softly, each flake settling silently on rooftops and streets. Yet beneath the hush came faint whispers, soft, fleeting, carried on the chill wind. They were unclear at first, like the rustling of leaves under frost, but Edward's heart recognized the pattern. Voices calling, waiting, seeking. He pressed a hand to the glass, peering into the moving fog. Shapes moved gently in the distance, lanterns casting wavering pools of light. Some figures paused, lifted their hands, or leaned slightly forward, drawn by the glow of the Pembroke windows and the warmth of the circle inside. Margaret joined him, her hand brushing his shoulder. "They hear us," she whispered. "The lights, the songs, it calls them." Edward nodded, his eyes scanning the street. The fog seemed almost alive, curling and retreating in response to their presence, creating paths for those who were wandering. He felt the pulse of the brass button in his pocket, a steady, reassuring beat as if confirming the life and energy of this gathering. He turned back to the room where visitors were quietly seated, sharing memories and softly humming the old carol. The children were leaning against the older guests, their small warmth mixing with the elders' stories, forming a subtle bridge between generations. Edward spoke gently. "Tonight we do more than remember. We guide. Every light, every song, every act of care draws them closer. Some have been lost, some have been forgotten, but none are beyond reach." A hush fell over the room as another figure appeared at the door, nearly invisible in the fog. The candlelight caught a glint of silver in their hair, and Edward recognized them, not from his own life, but from the sketches in the book of forgotten traditions. They were part of the circle he had yet to meet, guided by the gentle persistence of the old ways. One by one, others followed, their footsteps soft against the snow. Each arrival brought a quiet warmth, a sense of fullness, expanding the circle within the house. The whispers outside seemed to harmonize with the murmured carols inside, blending into a single soothing melody that resonated through the walls and into the hearts of all present. Edward realized as he watched the fog-parted street that this was the essence of Christmas, a gentle connection built on remembrance, guidance, and a lasting light of care. Tonight, he thought, no one would wander alone. The fog outside had begun to part, just enough to reveal more figures making their way toward the Pembroke home, each carrying a small lantern. Edward felt the pulse of anticipation in the air, subtle but persistent, as if the city itself were holding its breath, waiting for the circle to expand further. Margaret opened the front door, and Edward stepped aside, gesturing for the newcomers to enter. The children rushed forward with excited whispers, guiding the hesitant visitors to the warmth of the fire and the glow of the candles. Each figure paused at the threshold, as if savoring the contrast between the cold, whispering fog and the comforting light within. Edward noticed that some visitors carried small gifts, a sprig of holly, a tiny ornament, a carved wooden animal. He understood immediately they were offering tokens of remembrance, small gestures of connection, honoring both the living and those who had passed before them. "Place them carefully," Edward murmured, guiding them toward the windowsills and tables. "Each one carries meaning. Each one strengthens the circle." The newcomers settled in, forming a loose procession around the room. Their lanterns flickered gently, casting warm shadows that intertwined with the candlelight. The fire's crackle blended with the soft hum of voices, creating a symphony of warmth and life. Edward stepped to the center of the room, opening the book of forgotten traditions. "Let us sing together, he said softly, and Margaret began the familiar carol. One by one, each visitor joined in, some with full voices, others with delicate hums. The effect was mesmerizing. The sound swelled and softened, filling the room with a soothing, almost tangible presence. Outside, the fog shimmered in response, wrapping the approaching streets in gentle light. Edward realized that the lanterns were more than guides. They were signals, beacons for those still wandering, calling them closer with a quiet, persistent hope. The young man who had arrived earlier watched the procession, his eyes wide with awe. "It's beautiful," he whispered. "I've never felt anything like this before." Edward smiled gently. "This is the heart of the tradition," he said. "Not the gifts, not the songs, not even the candles alone, but the gathering, the remembering, and the quiet promise that no one will walk alone in the dark." The lanterns flickered, the candles glowed, and the fire's warmth wrapped around every visitor, binding them together in a circle of light that reached beyond the walls, beyond the fog, and into the very heart of the winter night. The warmth of the Pembroke home had settled deeply into every visitor. Yet outside, the fog moved like a living thing, curling around the street lamps and rooftops. Edward watched through the window as shadowy figures drifted just beyond the reach of the lanterns, hesitant and fragile, as if unsure whether the warmth inside would accept them. He sensed movement in the corners of the room, subtle, almost imperceptible shifts in the candlelight that suggested a presence he could not see fully. The brass button in his pocket pulsed softly, a quiet reminder that these were not ordinary shadows. They were echoes of lives, remnants of Christmases past, waiting to be welcomed. Margaret approached him, sensing his unease. "Do not worry," she whispered. "They are curious, not threatening. They are drawn by the circle we've made." Edward nodded, taking a slow, steadying breath. He could feel the rhythm of the fire, the quiet hum of the visitors, and the faint pull of the fog beyond the windows. It was a delicate balance. Warmth inviting the hesitant, light guiding the lost, and memory bridging the divide. One of the shadows stepped closer, just beyond the doorway. Edward squinted, trying to make out details, and noticed it was a child wrapped in tattered clothing, eyes wide with wonder. The candlelight flickered across their face, revealing a faint smile, hesitant but trusting. Edward reached out gently, guiding the child inside. "Welcome," he said softly. "You are safe here." The other shadows seemed to respond, moving forward in quiet procession. Each step brought the figures closer to the circle of light, their shapes becoming more defined as they approached. Some were children, others adults, all bearing the faint marks of long-ago winters, of nights spent alone, waiting for a glimmer of warmth. Inside, the visitors murmured greetings, soft and welcoming, encouraging the new arrivals. The young man, who had arrived earlier, offered a small nod and smile, helping to ease the shivering figures toward the fire. The children handed blankets, and Margaret guided them to cups of tea and plates of spiced treats. The fog outside seemed to pause, the whispers merging with the crackle of the fire and a low hum of voices. Edward realized that the shadows, though quiet and hesitant, were part of the tradition's living heartbeat, waiting to be remembered, to find comfort, and to join the circle that now pulsed with life, memory, and the lasting glow of Christmas light. The newest arrivals, now safely inside, began to share their tales softly, their voices trembling at first, then gaining confidence as the warmth of the room embraced them. Each story was a thread connecting the past to the present. A young girl spoke of snow-laden streets where she had once played, the crisp bite of winter on her cheeks. An elderly man recalled a long-forgotten Christmas feast, laughter echoing in a hall that no longer existed. Edward moved quietly among them, listening intently. Every tale carried a weight of longing, a memory preserved against time. He realized that these stories were as important as the candles, the songs, and the lanterns. the very essence of the forgotten traditions he had been entrusted to revive. Margaret poured more tea, the spicy aroma mixing with the scent of candle wax and pine. She encouraged the children to ask questions, gently prompting them to engage with the visitors. The children, full of innocent curiosity, leaned close to hear about old Christmas games, forgotten treats, and carols that had drifted from memory over the decades. The young man, still pale but now smiling, turned to Edward. "It feels as strange but wonderful," he said, "as if time has folded around us. These people, these stories, I can feel them as if they are here, yet they've lived so long ago." Edward nodded, glancing at the brass button in his pocket. Its warmth pulsed gently, matching with the collective heartbeat of the room. "That is the magic of remembrance," he said softly. "We keep them alive by honoring their voices, their joys, their sorrows. We allow them to exist here in this moment alongside us." Outside, the fog shifted again, revealing a faint glimmer of lantern light approaching in the distance. Edward could hear the soft crunch of snow beneath unseen feet. Each arrival added to the growing sense that the circle was expanding, not just physically, but spiritually, bridging generations and realities with warmth, stories, and memory. A fire crackled in response to the movement. Candlelight flickered in harmony, and the room seemed to hum with life. Edward understood more clearly than ever that this night, this circle of light, stories, and remembrance was more than tradition. It was sanctuary, a gentle haven where those forgotten, lost, or wandering could find connection and peace. As the fire crackled and the stories flowed, Margaret rose and approached a small, dusty cabinet in the corner of the room. From it, she retrieved a sprig of mistletoe, its delicate green leaves dotted with pale berries. She held it gently, the faint scent of earth and winter herbs rising from its stems. "This," she said softly, "is part of the old tradition, a symbol of peace, goodwill, and connection. It reminds us that even in the coldest winters, warmth can be shared and bonds can be strengthened." Edward nodded, understanding immediately. He took the mistletoe and moved toward the center of the room, inviting the visitors to join him. One by one they stepped forward, placing small gestures beneath the sprig, a whispered wish, a memory spoken aloud, a soft touch of hands, honoring the quiet magic of giving and receiving in its most intimate form. The children giggled softly, placing tiny sprigs of holly beside the larger mistletoe, their small fingers brushing against the leaves with awe. Even the young man, hesitant at first, offered a quiet word of hope, speaking for those who could no longer voice their own wishes. Outside, the fog moved around the glowing windows, reflecting the candlelight in gentle ripples across the snow. Edward could sense movement in the distant streets, figures drawn closer by the promise of warmth and remembrance, each step bringing them toward the circle he and Margaret had nurtured. Edward returned to the fireplace, placing the mistletoe carefully above the fire. Its presence seemed to deepen the glow in the room, the flames flickering brighter, the candlelight stretching further, and the warmth spreading to every corner. The visitors sitting or standing felt a subtle shift, a tangible sense of unity and peace settling over them, binding the living and departed in quiet acknowledgement. Margaret smiled, settling beside Edward. "Even small gestures matter," she whispered. "The heart of tradition is not grandeur, but intention, care, and the willingness to connect." Edward watched the mistletoe sway gently in the firelight, reflecting on the night's growing circle. Each story, each candle, each gesture of remembrance was another thread in the tapestry, pulling the forgotten and the wandering into the quiet glow of the present. The fire in the Pembroke fireplace crackled with a steady rhythm, its warmth radiating through the room and pressing back the chill that had crept in from the foggy streets. Edward sank into a chair near the flames, the brass button in his pocket warming his palm as he listened to the quiet murmurs of the gathered visitors. Each voice was a brushstroke on the canvas of the evening, delicate, soft, yet vivid in memory and emotion. Margaret moved among the guests, ensuring everyone had a blanket, a cup of tea, or a small plate of spiced treats. The children nestled close to the adults, their laughter quiet and gentle, like the soft jingle of distant sleigh bells. Outside, the snow continued its slow descent, each flake landing with a quiet whisper, adding to the peaceful hush that had covered the city streets. Edward noticed that some of the visitors were staring into the fire, their eyes reflecting the flickering flames. One elderly man, his coat threadbare, held his hands just above the warmth, closing his eyes as though the heat could reach beyond his body and touch memories long buried. A young girl, no older than 8, traced the outline of the candles on the windowsill, fascinated by the way the light danced and shimmered, a tiny smile tugging at her lips. Edward rose quietly and added a few logs to the fireplace. The fire roared softly, flames stretching higher, golden embers swirling into the air. The warmth seemed to ripple outward, brushing against each visitor, wrapping them in a comforting embrace. He knelt near the young man who had arrived early in the evening. "Do you feel it?" he asked gently, "the way the room holds everyone. This warmth, it isn't just the fire. It's the memory, the stories, the care we share. It's the heart of the tradition." The young man nodded, eyes wide. I can feel it. It's like the past and present are together here, all at once, safe, warm, remembered." Edward smiled, returning to his chair by the fire. The candlelight flickered alongside the flames, and outside the fog shifted once more, soft shapes moving closer, drawn by the glow. The circle inside the house had grown, including not only those physically present, but also the echoes of lives past, held gently by the fireplace's embrace. In that quiet warmth, Edward understood that this night, this circle, and this fire were more than rituals. They were a promise that no one, living or departed, would wander alone, and that memory, love, and light could bridge even the longest shadows. The soft murmur of voices and the crackle of the fire were joined by another sound. The faintest tinkle of a bell, barely audible at first, carried through the mist outside. Edward turned toward the window, noticing the fog rippled gently as if responding to the sound. A group of new visitors had arrived, their lanterns casting pale golden circles in the snowy street. Margaret lifted a small silver bell from the sideboard, its surface worn smooth by years of use. "Music calls them," she whispered. "A melody can guide even the lost, just as our lights do." Edward nodded and moved to the fireplace, taking the bell in his hand. He tapped it lightly, the tone clear and crisp, ringing out into the room and spilling softly into the foggy night. The visitors inside looked up, and the children's eyes sparkled with curiosity as the gentle notes mixed with the warmth of the fire and the flickering candlelight. One of the elderly women began to hum, matching the bell's tone, and soon others joined, creating a soft, harmonious melody that wrapped through the room like a silken ribbon. The young man followed, his voice low but steady, and the children added their tiny hums, weaving a lullaby that seemed to stretch beyond the walls. Outside, the figures paused, lanterns raised as they listened. One by one they crossed the threshold, drawn by the combined power of light, warmth, and song. Each newcomer carried a small token, a sprig of holly, a carved figure, a scrap of ribbon, gifts of remembrance and connection. Edward watched as the circle expanded, the bell's gentle notes blending with the voices and the crackle of the fire. Each sound seemed to touch something unseen, a thread connecting past and present, the living and those remembered. The children began to dance lightly around the edges of the circle, their soft footsteps mixing with the rhythm of the hums in the bell. The fog outside shimmered, curling around the streetlights and lanterns, as if acknowledging the growing harmony within the Pembroke home. Edward felt a deep calm settle over him. The room was alive with memory and music, warmth and connection, yet the atmosphere remained gentle, soft and sleep-friendly, the perfect balance between wonder and serenity. He realized that tonight, every sound, every light, every shared story and memory was a note in a larger lasting song. The song of remembrance, hope, and quiet magic. As the bell's gentle tones faded into the quiet hum of conversation, Margaret moved toward the kitchen corner where a small tray of dried herbs and spices awaited. She gently crushed a few sprigs of rosemary and thyme, letting their earthy aroma mix with the lingering scent of pine and beeswax. Cinnamon and clove from the simmering tea added warmth, creating a rich tapestry of scents that enveloped the room. Edward inhaled deeply, closing his eyes. The fragrances carried memories of Christmases long past, kitchens filled with laughter, fireplaces that glowed through winter nights, and the comforting feel of a home alive with stories. Even the young man, who had been quiet for much of the evening, took a careful breath and smiled, closing his eyes as the aroma seemed to transport him somewhere familiar yet unreachable. The children giggled softly, chasing faint wisps of aromatic smoke that drifted from the fireplace and spilling trays. Their small hands brushed against the pine branches and spice jars, and Edward noticed that their fascination added a subtle energy to the room, one that was warm, gentle, and sleep-friendly, weaving seamlessly into the calm atmosphere. Edward guided the visitor's attention to the scents. "Each fragrance is a reminder," he said softly. "A memory held in the air, waiting for us to notice. Rosemary for remembrance, pine for life, cinnamon for comfort. They are part of the traditions we honor tonight." Outside, the fog moved, carrying the faint scents along the streets. Shapes moved closer, lanterns bobbing gently in response to the invisible invitation. The city seemed to pause as though even the cold air wished to partake in the warmth and connection forming inside the Pembroke home. Margaret poured fresh tea for the newcomers, its steam rising in delicate spirals. Edward offered spiced cookies and honeyed bread, each bite accompanied by the mixing aromas. The combination of taste and scent created a sensory cocoon, comforting and grounding, easing any lingering unease and inviting quiet reflection. In the soft glow of candlelight and fire, surrounded by warmth, laughter, stories, and scent, Edward understood that Christmas was not merely a day or a feast. It was a living experience built from memory, connection, and the subtle magic that drew together past and present, the wandering and the remembered. The fog outside had begun to shift more noticeably, curling along the snow-covered streets in slow, deliberate waves. Edward pressed his hand against the window pane, feeling the subtle pulse of life beyond the glass. The shapes that had once been mere shadows were now growing more distinct, their outlines clearer as they approached the glowing threshold of the Pembroke home. Inside, the circle of visitors had deepened. Conversations flowed quietly, punctuated by soft laughter and the occasional hum of the carol. The children leaned closer to the adults, absorbing the stories and lessons of long-forgotten traditions, their wide eyes reflecting candlelight and fire alike. Margaret gently adjusted a lantern, its light flickering across the room and casting long, gentle shadows on the walls. Edward noticed that the approaching figures outside responded to the light, halting briefly as if testing its warmth before crossing the threshold. One by one, Edward murmured to the young man beside him, "They come closer. They are drawn to the circle, to the light, to the memory we hold here. It is the essence of tradition, guiding those who have wandered." The young man nodded, still amazed. "It's like the fog itself is alive, shaping itself around the warmth inside," he whispered. Edward smiled softly. "In a way, it is. Tonight, the fog is more than weather. It carries the stories, the longing, the hope. It responds to our care, our light, our remembrance." One figure stepped closer to the doorway. An elderly woman, her coat worn and dusted with frost, carrying a small bundle wrapped in cloth. Her silhouette was delicate, almost ethereal, yet her eyes shone with quiet gratitude as she crossed into the room. Others followed, each carrying a token, a small memory, a piece of the past, adding to the tapestry forming inside the Pembroke home. The circle swelled, filling with warmth, candlelight, and the quiet pulse of presence. Shadows had become silhouettes, and silhouettes were beginning to take shape as real breathing companions of the night. Edward realized that every visitor, every gesture, every soft laugh and whispered story was weaving a living bridge between worlds, between past and present, between memory and now. The fire crackled brighter, the candles flickered in harmony, and the room seemed to hold its breath, ready to embrace every new arrival with gentle, unwavering light. As the silhouettes filled the room, Edward felt a subtle shift in the atmosphere, as if the presence of so many memories had opened a door to something deeper. A hush settled over the circle, not of silence, but of anticipation. And from the back of the room came a faint, hesitant voice. It was a child, no older than 7, holding a small, worn sheet of paper. I know a carol," the child whispered, voice trembling yet earnest. "It's from long ago." Edward motioned gently for the child to come closer. The visitors leaned in, curious and attentive, as Margaret handed the child a small candle to hold. The flickering flame reflected in the child's wide eyes, giving a soft courage that seemed to stretch beyond their small frame. The first notes were fragile, almost lost in the warmth of the room. But gradually the melody grew stronger, a simple, haunting tune filled with longing and hope. The elderly visitors murmured the words softly, remembering the lines they had sung in their youth, while the children repeated them hesitantly, learning the rhythm and cadence as the song wrapped around them like a gentle blanket. Edward felt the brass button in his pocket pulse warmly, in tune with the hidden carol's quiet energy. The song seemed to resonate with the fire, the candlelight, and even the fog outside, which shimmered and twisted as if listening, guiding more figures slowly toward the welcoming glow of the windows. The young man, watching in awe, whispered, "It's like the song is alive, like it's been waiting for this moment." Edward nodded softly. "It has. This is how the forgotten are remembered. Through voice, through song, through the simple act of sharing what was almost lost. Every note carries memory. Every word carries hope." Outside, the faint silhouettes hesitated, then moved closer, as if drawn by the invisible thread of melody, stretching from the room into the fog. Inside, the circle swelled gently, the hidden carol weaving new layers into the tapestry of voices, candlelight and warmth, uniting past and present in a slow, soothing rhythm that seemed to slow time itself. Outside, the fog had begun to shimmer with a gentle luminescence, as if responding to the hidden carol now filling the Pembroke home. Edward stepped to the doorway and peered into the mist, noticing that the lanterns carried by the wandering figures glowed brighter. Their light refracted delicately through the snowflakes. Each lantern seemed alive, quivering softly, guiding its bearer forward with a quiet, persistent hope. Margaret joined him, offering a comforting hand on his arm. "They are following the song," she whispered. "The music carries them here toward warmth, toward remembrance." Edward nodded, feeling the pulse of the brass button in his pocket. Its warmth seemed to stretch outward, matching with the rhythm of the lanterns and the distant echoes of footsteps in the snow. Slowly, the first of the hesitant figures approached the porch, brushing snow from cloaks and scarves drawn by the collective embrace inside. Inside, the visitors gathered nearer the door, welcoming the newcomers with gentle smiles and quiet gestures. Children offered small blankets. The elderly murmured greetings, and Margaret handed each new arrival a steaming cup of spiced tea. The aroma of pine, cinnamon, and honey mixed with the crisp winter air, slipping through the open doorway, creating a sensory bridge between outside and inside, between cold and warmth. Edward watched as the lanterns entered one by one, their glow mixing with the candlelight, creating pools of soft amber across the floorboards. Each figure, hesitant at first, seemed to relax as the warmth enveloped them. The room was alive with subtle movement, gentle conversation, and the murmur of the hidden carol now joined by new voices. The young man whispered, amazed, "It's beautiful." "They look so peaceful now." Edward smiled, feeling a quiet satisfaction. The lanterns are not just light. They are invitations guiding the lost and the forgotten into the circle. Each step forward is a promise that here they will be remembered safe and part of something larger than themselves. Outside, the fog continued its slow, moving dance, revealing more figures drawn to the glow. The Pembroke home stood like a beacon in the night, its light and warmth reaching beyond walls and streets, touching hearts and memories, guiding each wandering soul toward the circle of comfort and remembrance. As the lanterns settled inside, the Pembroke home felt fuller than ever, yet the atmosphere remained soft, calming, and soothing. The hidden carol continued to echo gently, now joined by murmured voices from the newest arrivals. Each tone wove seamlessly with the crackling of the fire and the flickering of the candlelight, creating a gentle symphony that seemed to slow the very air in the room. Edward moved to the fireplace, kneeling beside the flames. He traced his fingers along the mantel, feeling the subtle warmth that radiated not just from the fire, but from the gathered presence of so many stories, memories, and lives. "Tonight," he said softly, "the fire carries more than warmth. It carries remembrance, hope, and the quiet magic of connection." Margaret poured tea for a small group, the scent of cinnamon and clove drifting through the room, mixing with the pine from the wreaths and garlands. The children, fascinated by the play of shadows, hummed along with the carol, their small voices delicate yet clear, threading a playful innocence through the gentle harmony. The elderly visitors leaned closer to the fire, hands extended toward the warmth, eyes soft as they recalled long ago winter's snow-covered streets and the scent of kitchens filled with bustling families. Each memory seemed to find a place in the room, adding weight and texture to the night's quiet energy. Edward glanced at the young man, who now stood near the window, watching the fog outside with a serene expression. "Do you feel it?" Edward asked. "The way the warmth grows with each person, each story, each song." The young man nodded slowly. "It's like the fire isn't just here," he murmured. "It's everywhere, reaching out into the fog, guiding them here, carrying the stories forward." Outside, the fog seemed to pulse in response, carrying the faint glow of lanterns closer with every beat of the room's quiet rhythm. Edward realized that the circle they had formed was no longer confined to walls or floors. It extended beyond, touching the streets, the wandering figures, and even the memories that had long been forgotten. The Pembroke home with its fire, candlelight, carols, and stories had become more than a house. It was a living vessel of remembrance, of connection, and of the lasting gentle magic of Christmas, capable of embracing every wandering soul with warmth and calm. The room had grown quieter, the conversation softening to murmurs as the visitors settled closer to the fire. Outside, the fog shifted once more, curling through the streets with a slow, deliberate grace, carrying whispers that seemed to echo from distant winters. Edward pressed his hand to the window pane, feeling the faint pulse of life within the mist, fragile yet persistent. Margaret approached, holding a small lantern she had lit for herself. "The whispers," she said softly, "are not just wind. They are memories, stories, and songs carried by the cold. They reach for warmth, for recognition." Edward nodded, sensing the delicate balance of the night. Each whisper that entered the house became part of the circle, transforming shadows into shapes, loneliness into belonging, and cold into a gentle embrace. The brass button in his pocket pulsed steadily, matching with the rhythm of the whispers and the fire's soft crackle. A small child, drawn to the window, pointed toward the fog. "They're coming," the child whispered, eyes wide with wonder. And indeed, silhouettes were moving forward, carrying tiny lanterns that trembled in the icy air. The fog parted slightly, as if acknowledging their approach, revealing figures that had paused, uncertain, until the warmth of the house guided them home. Edward gestured for the newcomers to step inside, and one by one they crossed the threshold. Each carried a small token, a sprig of holly, a fragment of ribbon, a carved wooden bird, symbols of remembrance, hope, and connection. The children handed them blankets and cups of tea, and the elderly offered quiet smiles and gentle words, embracing each arrival with the same calm, soothing energy that had filled the room since the evening began. The whispers outside softened into a lull, harmonizing with the murmur of voices inside and the gentle crackle of the fire. Edward realized that these subtle sounds, the faintest songs of memory, the quiet call of the fog, the soft step of the lantern bearers, were threads binding the living and the remembered into a single serene tapestry. He settled back into his chair near the fireplace, watching the flickering flames dance with the candlelight. The room was alive yet calm, full yet intimate. And in that balance, Edward felt the true heart of the night, a gentle, lasting connection, carried by warmth, memory, and the whispers of winter reaching into the hearts of all who had gathered. The candlelight flickered gently, casting long, soft shadows across the faces of the gathered visitors. Each flame seemed to hold its own small heartbeat, glowing steadily against the chill, creeping in from the fog beyond the windows. Edward moved slowly among the circle, noting how even the quietest participants seemed emboldened by the warmth and camaraderie that had grown over the evening. Margaret handed a small, freshly lit candle to one of the newest arrivals, a young woman whose hands trembled from the cold. "Hold it close," Margaret said softly. "Let it remind you of the courage you've carried here tonight. The courage to arrive, to share, and to be part of this circle." The woman smiled slightly, her eyes reflecting both the candlelight and newfound calm. She settled near the fireplace, allowing the warmth of the fire and the gathered people to ease the chill from her bones. Others followed, each taking turns holding the small flames, their faces brightening with quiet determination and trust. Edward observed the children who had begun to gather near the center of the room, forming a small, attentive audience. Their eyes sparkled as they watched the adults, both visitors and newcomers, carefully cradle their candles. Each flame seemed to symbolize more than light. It was hope, memory, and the gentle bravery of stepping into a space where past and present intertwined. Outside, the fog twisted slowly, revealing more lanterns bobbing faintly in the distance. The soft hum of voices inside, combined with the glow of candles and firelight, seemed to carry through the mist like an invisible invitation. One by one, the hesitant figures drew nearer, emboldened by the visible warmth waiting for them. Edward knelt near the fire, taking a deep breath and allowing himself a moment of quiet reflection. The room, now full of candles, lanterns, and soft voices, had become a sanctuary. Each small flame represented a life touched, a memory honored, a quiet courage recognized. And as the fire crackled and the carols murmured softly, he understood that even the gentlest light could guide the most wandering soul home. The room had settled into a rhythm of warmth and gentle murmurings, the fire and candlelight blending into a soft golden glow. Edward turned toward the window once more, watching the snow fall in slow, thick layers, each flake settling quietly atop the streets, rooftops, and lamplights. The mist had thinned slightly, revealing delicate silhouettes of figures still approaching, lanterns swaying gently in their hands. Margaret handed a small tray of spiced treats to the children, who offered them to the new arrivals. Each bite mixing with the aroma of pine, cinnamon, and honey seemed to bring back memories, smiles, laughter, soft words of comfort from winters long past. The visitors, young and old, savored the flavors, their expressions softening as if reconnecting with distant moments they had long forgotten. Edward noticed the elderly man near the fireplace, tracing his fingers across the rim of his teacup. "I remember snow like this," he murmured softly, almost to himself. Back when the streets were silent and the lanterns glowed at night and family gathered near fires that never seemed to die. The young man leaned closer, listening intently. "It's beautiful," he whispered. "Even the snow outside feels alive tonight, like it's part of the story." Edward nodded. "It is," he said gently. "Every flake, every gust of wind, every lantern in the fog carries memory. Snow has a way of preserving what's precious, of letting the past drift gently into the present if we pay attention." Outside, the fog shimmered in the lantern light, creating faint reflections across the streets. One by one, more figures stepped closer, some holding small gifts or tokens, bits of ribbon, carved toys, tiny sprigs of holly, each carefully wrapped in cloth or paper. The children guided them in, helping place the tokens upon the windowsills and tables, while Margaret offered warm tea and blankets. Edward watched as the room swelled with life, the snow outside softening into a silent backdrop for the growing circle within. Every whispered memory, every gentle laugh, every shared treat added a layer to the calm tapestry of the night. The Pembroke home had become more than a place. It was a vessel of remembrance, a sanctuary where snow-dusted memories could rest, mix, and glow once again. The night had deepened, and the Pembroke home pulsed with a quiet, soothing warmth. The fire crackled gently in the fireplace, sending amber light flickering across the faces of the visitors. Shadows stretched and retreated in time with the flames, creating a slow, calming rhythm that matched the soft murmur of voices and the faint hum of the carol still being shared. Edward moved among the guests, observing the subtle gestures of connection. A child leaned against an elderly visitor, whispering a question about a story they had just heard. A newcomer, hands wrapped around a warm cup of tea, smiled shyly at the young man who had been observing so much of the night's unfolding magic. Even the brass button in Edward's pocket seemed to pulse more steadily now, as though matching with the hearts in the room. Margaret carefully arranged more candles along the mantel and windowsills, their gentle glow filling every corner of the room. She added small mirrors behind them, amplifying the light in soft arcs, creating a shimmering dreamlike quality that made the space feel larger, safer, and even more magical. Edward leaned back near the fireplace, allowing the warmth to seep into him. He could feel the night outside, the snow, the fog, the distant lanterns pressing close, yet kept at bay by the gentle glow within. Each flicker of the fire, each subtle hum, each soft smile of the gathered circle seemed to weave together, forming a cocoon of calm, hope, and remembrance. The visitors, both new and old, began to settle into a quiet rhythm. Some whispered memories to one another. Some hummed the lingering carol, and the children traced light patterns across the floor with the tips of their fingers. It was a slow, gentle unfolding of the evening, a calm celebration of connection that required nothing more than presence and care. Edward realized then that this glow, the warmth of the fireplace, the flicker of candlelight, the gentle heartbeat of voices was more than fire or light. It was the embodiment of the night's magic, a living, breathing force that held the lost and wandering close, that allowed memories to mix with the present, and that promised the comfort of belonging, if only for tonight. Outside, the snowfall deepened, settling softly on rooftops and the lantern-lit streets. The flakes were large and slow, drifting almost lazily, each one catching the glow of the lanterns like tiny fleeting stars. The fog had thinned slightly, allowing the soft light to shimmer across the snow-covered ground, painting the world in pale golds and silvers. Inside, the Pembroke home remained warm and inviting. The fire continued its gentle crackle, and the candlelight flickered softly across walls lined with wreaths, garlands, and the small, thoughtful tokens of remembrance left by visitors. Edward watched the children, who had begun to write tiny notes and wishes on scraps of paper, placing them carefully beneath the candles and lanterns, as if entrusting the flickering flames to carry their hopes into the night. Margaret moved quietly among the adults, offering spiced tea and warm blankets. The elderly visitors leaned into her gestures, their voices lowered, sharing soft memories of winters long past. Each story added a subtle texture to the room, layering comfort and nostalgia atop the existing warmth. Edward approached the window and inhaled deeply, letting the crisp winter air mix with the gentle scent of pine, cinnamon, and melting snow that seeped in at the edges. He could see the lanterns of those still approaching their light, steady, unhurried, as if aware that this journey was meant to be gentle, calm, and contemplative. The snow itself, Edward murmured to the young man, seems to understand the night. Each flake slows the world down, encouraging reflection, memory, and quiet connection. It is part of the circle as much as the candles or the fire. The young man nodded, eyes fixed on the serene, softly glowing street. "It feels, like time is holding its breath," he said. "Like the snow and the fog are part of the same story as us." Edward smiled softly. "Exactly. Every falling flake, every drifting shadow, every glow of a lantern is part of the same rhythm tonight. We are not just observing the season. We are participating in it, and it is participating in us." The circle inside continued to hum gently, stories and songs mixing with the quiet, patient snowfall outside. And in that harmonious space, Edward felt a deep calm, a sense that the night, the home, and every wandering soul beyond the windows were all connected through warmth, memory, and the quiet magic of Christmas. The room had grown softer still, the fire's amber glow mixing seamlessly with the flickering candles and the lanterns that dotted the space. Each light cast delicate shadows that danced slowly across the walls, creating a living tapestry of warmth and comfort. Edward leaned against the mantel, watching as the reflections intertwined with the faces of the gathered visitors, each expression bathed in gentle radiance. Margaret moved quietly among them, adjusting lanterns, refilling cups of tea, and straightening small tokens of remembrance on the windowsills. Every gesture was deliberate, filled with care and the knowledge that each detail mattered in weaving the night's calming rhythm. The children moved through the room with soft, deliberate steps, their eyes wide as they traced the path of light and shadow, learning the unspoken patterns of connection. Edward noticed the young man sitting near the fireplace, gazing thoughtfully at the reflections. "It's peaceful," he murmured. "I never imagined light could feel like this, like it's wrapping everyone together, connecting past and present." Edward smiled, feeling the warmth from both the fire and the sentiment in the room. "Light has memory," he said softly. "It holds what we bring to it, stories, hope, longing. Tonight, it carries all of it, weaving it into a quiet, living tapestry that embraces anyone willing to enter." Outside, the fog curled gently, revealing faint silhouettes approaching with lanterns in hand. The lights responded, catching on the glass and refracting softly, creating a subtle echo of the warmth inside. Each step closer was deliberate, unhurried, as if the night itself encouraged them to move with care, to honor the calm rhythm of the evening. The carols continued in muted tones, the children's soft hums blending seamlessly with the elders' voices. Together they formed a gentle chorus, harmonizing with the fire, the candles, and the lanterns, creating a quiet symphony that filled every corner of the home. Edward felt a deep calm settle over him, a sense that the circle made of light, warmth, stories, and memory had become more than just a gathering. It was now a living, breathing tapestry connecting everyone present, and even those outside in the fog, in a shared, serene embrace. The soft glow of the candles and lanterns bathed the room in a golden light, and a new rhythm began to unfold. Margaret brought forward a small, worn basket filled with tiny, simple gifts. Hand-carved wooden figurines, embroidered handkerchiefs, and small pouches of dried herbs. A gift, she said softly, need not be grand to carry meaning. Tonight, even the smallest offering is a bridge between hearts. Edward nodded and helped the children distribute the gifts, their small hands passing them gently to the visitors, who accepted them with quiet smiles. Each exchange was deliberate, slow, and intentional, filled with care and acknowledgement. The gifts were tokens not just of the present, but of memory, connection, and quiet kindness. A tangible thread weaving the circle even tighter. The young man offered his own gift, a small brass ornament he had found tucked away in his coat pocket, hesitating as he handed it to an elderly woman. She accepted it with a soft murmur of thanks, her eyes reflecting both candlelight and something deeper, gratitude, recognition, and a rekindling of memory. Children giggled quietly as they presented tiny bundles of holly and ribbons, placing them alongside the candles and lanterns, their energy filling the room with subtle warmth and gentle motion. Even the faint silhouettes of newcomers outside seemed to respond, pausing to watch the glow, the movement, the slow unfolding of the night's magic. Edward moved toward the fireplace, placing a small carved bird from the basket on the mantel. A firelight caught its edges, creating a delicate shimmer that danced across the walls. Every gift, every gesture, he said softly, is more than it appears. It is memory, hope, and presence given freely, shared gently, and held in the circle we have created tonight. Margaret poured another round of spiced tea, the aroma mixing with pine and cinnamon, and the room hummed with quiet contentment. The fire crackled steadily, the candles flickered, and the children's soft laughter wove seamlessly into the low murmur of voices. Each gift exchanged added another layer to the night's calm, a tangible reminder of connection and the gentle, lasting magic of Christmas. The room had settled into a tender hush, the soft glow of candlelight flickering against the walls, and the gentle crackle of the fire blending with the muted hum of voices. Edward leaned back in his chair, observing the circle of visitors. Every face, young and old, seemed caught between the present and memories that stretched long into the past. Margaret approached with a small leather-bound book, its edges worn from years of use. "These are whispers of the past," she explained softly. "Stories that were nearly forgotten, kept alive only in memory. Tonight we share them so that they may live again." One by one, she opened the book, reading aloud short passages of tales, of snowy streets illuminated by lanterns, of families huddled near fires, of forgotten carols sung in quiet corners. The children listened wide-eyed, the elderly nodded in recognition, and the young man leaned closer, captivated by the vivid worlds unfolding in Margaret's gentle voice. The firelight seemed to respond to each story, flames stretching just a little higher, shadows dancing more vividly across the room. Even outside, the fog shifted in subtle swirls, carrying the faint echo of voices and the warmth of the home into the silent streets. Edward watched the visitors as they shared their own memories in response. Quiet anecdotes, long-lost traditions, soft recollections of winters gone by. Each whisper layered gently atop the next, forming a delicate living tapestry of the night. The children added small drawings capturing the images that came to mind, and Margaret placed them near the fire to catch the glow of the flames. "This is the heart of remembrance," Edward murmured to the young man. "The past is not gone, merely waiting for a gentle hand to bring it into the present. Here, tonight, it lives again, softly, without rush or clamor, but with warmth and care." Outside, more lanterns drifted closer, drawn by the quiet magic within. The fog seemed almost reverent, pausing to allow the warmth and stories to reach outward. Inside, the visitors settled further into the circle, their hearts lighter, their minds calm, and the gentle rhythm of the night continued. A slow, soothing flow of light, warmth, and whispers of the past. The room had grown hushed, the only sounds, the soft crackle of the fireplace, and the distant whisper of snow rushing against the windows. Edward sank into his chair, feeling the steady warmth of the fire seep into his bones. The circle of visitors had settled comfortably around the room, their faces relaxed, softened by the calm intimacy of the night. Margaret moved quietly among them, offering gentle nods and small smiles, her presence a quiet anchor. She paused at the window, gazing out at the snow-covered streets, lanterns swaying gently in the fog. "Midnight is near," she murmured. A moment for reflection, for gratitude, for quiet hope. Edward followed her gaze, noticing the way the candlelight flickered across the room, illuminating the faces of both young and old. Each visitor held a subtle glow of their own, eyes reflecting memory, warmth, and gentle wonder. The brass button in his pocket felt warm against his palm, a comforting heartbeat in sync with the soft rhythm of the night. The children leaned close to the fire, eyes heavy but curious, holding small lanterns that added delicate pools of light to the room. The young man sat nearby, absorbing the serenity, his fingers tracing the edges of the gift he had received, now understanding the quiet magic of connection and remembrance. Edward spoke softly, his voice carrying through the room without breaking the stillness. "Tonight, we have shared more than stories or songs. We have shared presence, warmth, and memory. The circle we have built is not bound by these walls. It extends into the snow, the fog, the lanterns, and every heart touched by this night." Outside, the fog shimmered faintly, as if acknowledging the sentiment. The distant lanterns moved closer, still, drawn to the gentle glow of the home, the calm hum of voices, and the steady pulse of the fire. It was as if the night itself had paused to witness the circle of connection, reflection, and quiet hope forming inside. As the hour grew late, the room settled further into stillness. The fire crackled softly, the candlelight glimmered, and Edward felt a deep sense of peace wash over him. The circle, the stories, the carols, the gifts, and the whispers of the past had woven together into a serene, lasting tapestry, a gentle embrace for every wandering soul, present and remembered. The Pembroke home had embraced a deep, serene calm. The fire in the fireplace crackled with a slow, comforting rhythm, sending a soft warmth that reached every corner of the room. Candles flickered gently on the mantel and windowsills, their light mixing with the glow of the lanterns, casting subtle patterns across the walls and floor. Edward moved slowly among the visitors, observing the quiet connections that had formed. Children rested against elders, small hands holding tiny gifts or sprigs of holly. Each person seemed to radiate a soft inner warmth, a reflection of the care and remembrance shared throughout the evening. Margaret approached Edward, carrying a small tray with a single candle for each newcomer who had arrived during the night. "Every light is a memory," she whispered, "a story held gently, shared freely, and given a place to glow." Edward nodded, guiding each visitor to place their candle near the others. As the flames multiplied, the room glowed brighter yet softer, the illumination wrapping everyone in a gentle, encompassing warmth. The brass button in Edward's pocket pulsed lightly, as if echoing the rhythm of the many hearts present, each connected through memory, song, and the quiet comfort of shared stories. The children's whispers blended with the soft hum of the carols, creating a delicate harmony that lingered in the room like a gentle breeze. The elderly shared stories of winters long past, tales softened by age, yet enriched by wisdom. Each word, each gesture, each flame was a thread, weaving together into a tapestry of quiet reflection and tender remembrance. Outside, the fog shifted and moved, the lanterns of the late arrivals casting soft reflections on the snow. The night seemed to hold its breath, honoring the glow and warmth within. Pausing in reverence for the circle of connection formed on this Christmas Eve, Edward sank into his chair by the fireplace, letting the serenity of the room envelop him. He realized that the glow of remembrance was more than light. It was the lasting warmth of shared memory, hope, and presence, a gentle force that would linger long after the night had passed. Edward shifted in his chair, watching the frost gradually creep across the edges of the windows. Each delicate crystal pattern caught the candlelight and firelight, sparkling softly, as if sprinkled with tiny stars. Outside, the snow fell steadily, thickening the blanket that covered the streets and rooftops, each flake a silent witness to the calm within. Margaret moved near the windows, brushing her hand gently against the frosted panes. "The frost remembers," she said softly. "It holds the cold, the quiet, the stillness. And tonight, it carries the warmth of our stories, reaching through the glass into the night." Children pressed their small hands to the window, leaving tiny prints that fogged slightly before fading. They giggled softly, fascinated by the patterns forming under their touch, tracing shapes that mirrored the memories and images shared throughout the evening. Lanterns outside reflected faintly in the glass, creating golden halos that danced alongside the frost, blending the warmth within with the cold and mist outside. Edward felt the subtle pulse of the brass button in his pocket, its warmth like a gentle heartbeat matching with the rhythm of the night. He noticed the young man standing nearby, eyes wide as he traced the lines of frost with a finger, imagining stories etched into the ice, echoes of Christmases past, whispers of those who had walked the streets long ago. Inside, the room remained quiet but alive. The fire crackled in steady harmony with the low hum of voices, while the candlelight flickered softly across faces deep in reflection. The children's soft whispers, the elders' gentle stories, and the visitors' careful movements all combined into a slow, soothing rhythm, enveloping the room in a cocoon of warmth and serenity. Edward realized that the frost on the window panes was not a barrier but a bridge. It held the cold of the outside world and the warmth of the circle inside together, creating a delicate balance. In that quiet reflection, he felt the essence of the night, a living, breathing space where past and present, memory and presence, warmth and cold, all existed in gentle harmony. The room was steeped in a comforting blend of scents, pine from the garlands, cinnamon and clove from the spiced tea, and the subtle sweetness of honeyed bread lingering on plates. Each aroma wove together like threads in a tapestry, creating a calm, enveloping warmth that invited deep breaths and slow reflection. Edward moved slowly among the visitors, inhaling the layered fragrances that seemed to carry memories from years past. A soft smile touched his lips as he noticed the young man closing his eyes, taking in the scents and letting a quiet smile spread across his face. Even the children paused, inhaling deeply as if savoring the invisible stories carried by the aromas. Margaret poured more tea, the steam curling gently into the air and mixing with the lingering scent of pine and candles. "Smell is memory's companion," she said softly, her voice almost a whisper. "It reaches parts of the heart that sight and sound cannot. Tonight, every aroma carries hope, comfort, and quiet joy." The visitors nodded, some murmuring soft agreements, while others simply breathed in the moment, letting the scents guide them deeper into the night's serene rhythm. Edward observed the brass button in his pocket, feeling or anywhere else across the world. Let this calm stay with you. Take a moment to breathe, reflect, and hold the warmth of the night close. May your dreams carry the soft glow of candlelight, the gentle embrace of fire-warmed rooms, and the quiet magic of connection and hope. Close your eyes now and drift into a restful, peaceful sleep.